Hey all, welcome to Parker's Reef. On today's episode, we're going to take a look into this. Reef Moonshiners, what is it, what's the purpose, and how do you do it to your reef tank? Alright, thank you for joining me on another episode of Parker's Reef, a very special episode where I have answered you out there, the viewers who have asked in huge numbers for this video today, covering the Reef Moonshiners program that is taking the reefing world by storm, a methodology that has a little bit of mystique around it, and hopefully in today's video we can demystify it and explain how you go about the process and get the incredible results that all of the Reef Moonshiners around the world out there are experiencing. We'll cover what it is, what its purpose, and how you apply it, well, maybe how I apply it to my dream reef tank, and hopefully answer all of the questions you guys have. So firstly, what exactly is it? Hopefully most of you out there are familiar that our reef tanks, particularly those with corals in them, consume elements. Now most people are familiar with alkalinity, calcium and magnesium. They're our big three, but beyond those, there is a huge number of trace elements that also get consumed or removed by a different number of export methods in our reef tanks. Now, you can quickly understand that if those elements get low or completely depleted, it can have huge devastating effects on not just the corals in our reef tanks, but the entire biology in there. So it's critical that we keep these trace elements at their required levels. Now, Reef Moonshiners is simply a methodology and of course some products which you do not have to use to follow the methodology, but they do have their own range of products, which does obviously make the process a little bit simpler for getting those elements back into your reef tank. And obviously the methodology gives you a process and a calculator to make that as simple as possible. We'll go through all of that in details in just a minute. Now, you may be wondering what makes Reef Moonshiners different from the huge number of trace element programs that are out there already in the reefing world. Now, there's a few different ways to answer this, but I'll start off by saying it's not a one-size-fits-all program. You're not going to find a couple of bottles that are called ABC or something like that, where you dose these mix of elements into your tank, and that should just keep things all roughly where you need them. This is an incredibly tailored version because every single reef tank with different corals, different export methods, different lighting, different flow, different fish, you name it, every single reef tank is different out there, and Reef Moonshiners gives you the ability to tailor the trace element program exactly to your reef tank. Now, how does it go about that? Because that's a fairly obvious statement. Everyone wants to do that. Well, the way it does that is it measures each and every element individually via ICP and then gives you a process for adding those back into your tank, either via correctional doses or daily doses, which we'll go through shortly. Now, the reason why I like this system, as I think I've touched on a number of other videos, is that it makes sense to me. It's a very methodical and calculated method. There's no sort of licking your finger and holding it up in the air. You measure an element, you get a result. We have a target which is slightly elevated above natural saltwater levels that we're aiming for. Then we follow the method to get those elements up to where we need them and to keep them where we need them. And once we keep all of those elements up where we need them to be, it gives our reef tank the opportunity to be its absolute best. Now, with any trace element supplementation to your reef tank, whether it be Reef Moonshiners or another program, it is critically important that you do not overdose these elements. Shooting above and beyond the target value for these parameters can have incredibly devastating results on your reef tank, by far much more devastating than not dosing them at all. So it is critically important that you add the elements in the right times at the right amounts. Now, Reef Moonshiners does this by a couple of different approaches. We have daily doses, which we add to the tank every single day, and then we also have correctional dosages, which we do once every month or two, just after you get an ICP result, basically to reset your levels where they need to be. These parameters are split up because some of them are very low levels that get consumed or removed from our tank very, very quickly, so we need to give small doses very frequently. And then the correctional doses are ones that we can be a little bit more heavy-handed with and just ensure that we bump it back up to the value every time we do an ICP and reset those parameters. All right, enough preamble. You're excited and you want to see how we go about doing the Reef Moonshiners method, so there's probably no better way than to show how I do it on my dream reef tank. And with that, please do bear in mind, this is not an officially endorsed methodology by Reef Moonshiners. They have not seen this video before it's gone live on YouTube. However, I will say that I am obviously following their guidelines, but please do take it with a grain of salt and make your own path in the Reef Moonshiners world. And following that, it would be remiss of me not to mention the handbook. If you jump onto the Reef Moonshiners website, which I'll put all the links down here for you to go and do, you will find a link to their free handbook, which has a wealth of information in there, both on the methodology and also just on general coral health. I would highly recommend, if you're looking at getting into this methodology, that you download that book and read it cover to cover at least once, but probably more likely 2 or 3 times, because every time I read it, I find another little nugget of information that I did not see last time. So it is a great place to start. Now, with that aside, we're up to step 1, and the first thing you need to do there is grab yourself an ICP test kit. Now, the one I'm holding here is a Reef Moonshiners branded ICP test kit, which is supported by Oshimo over in the United States. Now, I've actually personally never done a Reef Moonshiners ICP. I typically use Triton because it is available here in Australia and it gives me quick turnarounds. The team there have been doing Reef ICP for a very, very long time, and I really trust the results I get from there. However, if you are in the United States and you have access to these test kits, it may well be of interest to try. The Reef Moonshiners test kit is in depth. It comes with gloves, syringes, large vials for sample water, pre-filters to get organics out of the water before you send it off for ICP testing. It's an incredibly thorough test kit that hopefully I'll be able to do a review on shortly, because I've got this one in my hot little hands. But the key thing here is to do an ICP test. It does not necessarily matter which brand. I know a lot of people get caught up on whether it's ATI or Reef Moonshiners. You can use any ICP test kit out there. Some of them do test elements that others don't, but don't stress over that too much. We're going to use a Triton ICP test kit in this video, and we're going to follow that along. And if that's what you have access to, fantastic. All right, step 2, once you've got your ICP results back, you're gonna jump on your computer, go to the Reef Moonshiners website and download their free calculator. You will find links to it all over their website. It's something that every moonshiner out there uses multiple times. So you're gonna download that. Once you've downloaded that, open it up and we'll follow things through on my computer now. Okay, once you have downloaded and opened the Reef Moonshiners calculator or tool, you will be presented with a number of options here on the first page. These first 2 here are whether you've used the official Reef Moonshiners lab test, whether it's the ICP OES or the ICP MS, which is further explained in detail in the handbook, so I won't go into it here. But otherwise, you're using the ATI test kit, or in my instance, Triton, which I will go to that link there, or I can select it from the tabs along the top here. There's some other tools as well, including the classic calculator, dosing buddy, and the product compatibility comparison chart. Quite the mouthful for a voiceover, all available there as well. But I'm going to jump on over to the ATI ICP assessment tool. And this is one that I have pre-filled in. Now, I've done that by grabbing the results from my Triton ICP test kit, which comes to me in this format here, which is great. You can download this as a CSV, which is what I like to do, because the recommended set points are not always the same for what Triton say versus, or any other ICP test kit, versus what Reef Moonshiners are aiming for. So I basically want to get the parameter name and the value and bring that out into a separate spreadsheet, which is something like this here. I also like to then sort them alphabetically, which makes it a little bit easier for me to then enter them into the Reef Moonshiners spreadsheet. So with these values in mind, I jump back over to the Reef Moonshiners calculator and I start entering those details in. So obviously we start off with the system volume, because each one of these dosages is going to be recommended based on your set point, your actual tested point, and the volume of your system. So it's very important you get that as accurate as possible. Worth noting, you enter in gallons, but it will show you the liter equivalent there. And my tank's 1400 liters, so I've gone for 380 gallons. I could probably try and dial that in a touch to get it in a little bit closer and see how we go. Let's have a look. If I go to 372, yeah, maybe that's closer to it. So let's roll with that. Then I enter in things like salinity, carbonate hardness, and you'll note when you put these values in, this little comment section will populate. So things like this here, the salinity is testing a little bit high. It recommends I verify that salinity and if need be, adjust it. Things like carbonate hardness, mine's coming up at 8 DKH, and that's saying that's ideal. But things like magnesium tested at 1425, and the ideal range by the Reef Moonshiner method is 1350 ppm or mg/L. So it's recommending I let this naturally settle down, and as a result there is no dosage required for any milliliters for any days. Now you keep going through entering each one of your values, and you'll notice that when you get something like I have here, my bromide/bromide of 78 mgl, Reef Moonshiners recommends a target of 85. Now, it doesn't sound like I'm far off there. I got 78, I'm looking for 85, but it is a correctional dosage of 182 milliliters, thankfully only for 1 day. Now, you will note that we've got 182.54 milliliters here. When we're talking volumes that high, I'm not too stressed about the 0.54, but obviously if it was recommending a dosage of 1.54 milliliters, I would be very conscious of that extra 0.54 milliliters. I will most likely dose 180 mil into my tank as a correction, and we'll go from there. Now again, you keep entering in your volume or your values, enter them in, and take note of the comments section here. Not so much the formulas in there, but the comments and your dosage instructions. You can just have a look at these dosage instructions. It will show you down the bottom, and we'll get there soon. But I do want to show, just as you go through, it's worth paying attention to these comments, because things like iron here, for instance, mine tested up as 0, which is great, but it is saying that I need to do a daily dose a daily dose of either their classic element, which is the full strength one, or a larger dose of their watered down, their dosing pump variant of that parameter. However, this little bit of information in here is something a lot of people slip over. So this is why it's very important to read the comments. My iron is testing up to 0, which is great. However, the dosing instructions should be taken into account that if you have macroalgae in your setup, i.e. refugium, you should add an extra 1 times the recommended daily dosage. So we've gone from 0.13 mil of a day up to 0.26 of a day. If you have a decent amount of coral in your tank, add another 1 times again. And if you have continuous activated carbon in your system, add another 1 times again. So I actually need to do 4 times this dosage, which is getting us up around about that 0.5 milliliter a day of iron, much more than the 0.13 mil per day that it recommends there. So that's why it's super important you check out the comments as you go, and you keep filling in all of your parameters till you get down here where we've got a dosing summary for the above, and that then tells us each one of our elements, whether we need to do any correctional dosages there. So you can see magnesium, calcium, potassium, no dosages required for those, but bromide, I've got 182.5 mil for 1 day to bring that up. Strontium, I've got to do 26 mil a day. I'm not worried about the 0.08 there for 5 days. So that's one that we obviously can't do just 130 mil in one dosage. It'll be too much. So we need to spread that out over 5 days. Things like fluoride, for instance, I can do a fairly large dosage each day for 8 days. So it's taking quite a bit of a correctional dosage to bring that up. Now, once we get down a little bit further, you'll see these items down here, like manganese, for instance, is recommending that I do a daily dosage if I use the full strength, the Reef Moonshiner Classic of 1.4 mil a day, or if I'm using their dosing pump equivalent, or the nano, which I wouldn't buy the nano version for my tank, but if you do have a small tank, rather than dosing a fraction of a mil, you can use their watered down version of a different amount. Now, things like iron, like we touched on earlier, I'm going to make note of that and actually dose 4 times that in, because of the macroalgae and the activated carbon and the coral load in my system all bumps that value up, and I'll make note of that as we go. The other thing I should point out down here, there's some optional elements here you can cover. But down here is something that's super, super handy for people that are first starting out with the Reef Moonshiners program. You get a first time user shopping list, which tells you the elements you need to get and the number of bottles you need to get. Now, thankfully for me, this is not the first time that I have done a Reef Moonshiners calculator process following an ICP result. So a lot of these bottles I already have, which is super handy. But if this was the first time and you had no products, you could go through here and see what you need. Now, you will note that not everything, like their magnesium, they recommend a BRS, calcium, they recommend BRS, potassium, they recommend Brightwell, iodide, they recommend Seachem, so they do recommend some other products where possible. And there also are some optional elements like the Liquimud, the Vitamin Carbex, nitrate if you need to bring your nitrate up, and they're mentioned down here, along with some other things like a kitchen scale for getting your daily, your correctional dosages in very accurate. and some droppers and things like that if you need to do very, very small amounts. But that is your shopping list. Now that you've got your shopping list, you can head into your local retailer that carries the Reef Moonshiner products. Now, if you're in America, you've got a lot of options. Here in Australia, thankfully now we do have a few options. The one I like to use is Reeftopia here because they post Australia-wide. They carry the full range, and one of the owners, Michael there, is an absolute long-time Reef Moonshiner himself, so you can always run some of the questions past him. But you need to go through here, pick up the different elements that you require in the number of bottles you require, and then you just got to play the waiting game and wait for those to arrive at your door, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, now that your products have arrived and you've got your Reef Moonshiners calculator showing your dosages, I personally like to grab a little export of that recommendation and put that into a basic notes file on my phone. It makes it much easier for me when I'm at my tank to keep track of both the correctional dosages that I'm doing to reset those elements, but also my daily doses. It just makes it a much more straightforward process, and it's a little tip I recommend for you. Let's focus on the correctional doses first. Now, these are the ones that we need to do in less frequent chunks, and we do larger volumes to reset those parameters where we need them in our reef tank. Now, at this point, you will most likely have a number of elements with a set volume amount you need to do each day for a number of days. To do this accurately, I like to use a cup with a kitchen scale because I do find that measuring the weight in grams equivalates to the amount in milliliters, and that makes it a very, very precise way of dosing those slightly larger volumes that are a bit more than, say, 3 or 5 milliliters at a time. If it's somewhere around that 3 to 5 milliliters or less at a time, I'll just use the syringe because I find that's much, much more accurate. But as soon as we get over that 5 milliliter dosage amount, I will measure it out in a cup with a kitchen scale. Now, once we've sorted out our correctional dosages, it's time to focus on the daily dosages. Now, for those, I like to get my bottles, I like to put the stopper that comes with them into the top, load up the appropriate syringe. If you're talking up to 5 milliliters, put a 5 milliliter syringe in there. For a lot of these daily dosages, you're going to be talking 1 milliliter or less. So obviously a 1 milliliter syringe is going to give you great accuracy. And I personally like to print out a label and put that on the bottle so I know how much I'm adding every single day. It does also give me the ability to peel that label back and see what I was dosing last time I made an adjustment via my ICP and the time before. It's a neat little way of keeping a history right where you dose your products. Now, one point I should make here, now whilst they are daily doses, if you skip a day or you're going away for a long weekend, do not fret. I highly recommend not overdosing. As we touched on before, these are elements that we need a very little a bit very often. So if you were not going to be there for a day or two, I do not recommend getting someone else to add those elements into your tank. And personally, I would lean away from automating them with dosages, although it is possible to get dosing pump watered down versions if that's the way you want to go. Personally, I quite enjoy doing my daily doses at the tank every day, and if I'm not available or I go away for work or to film a YouTube video, I'm happy for those dosages not to go in for that period of time. They are not the sort of element that's going to crash the tank if you don't dose. It's just going to thrive better when they are dosed. And you should also note that adding more is not going to make it even better. We want to dose precisely the amount it's telling us, no more. If you are going to do anything, do a little bit less. More does not equal better in this instance. Now, in this point in time, you have completed your initial correctional dosages and you've been following your daily doses now for a little while. Hopefully your reef tank is rewarding you with incredible growth and color and just showing great overall health. You may be wondering how long should you wait before doing another ICP to see if your correctional and also your daily doses have worked. That's entirely up to you. Personally, I like to give it 2 or 3 months, although I know a number of people out there like to do it monthly. That's entirely up to you. I find after doing this a few months now that I can get away with doing it every 2 or 3 months because I can start to preempt what my correctional dosages are going to be. I know what my reef tank consumes more than most other reef tanks and less than other reef tanks, so I know what I'm going to have to put in my correctional dosages, and I'm always curious to see how my daily dosages vary based on what's changed in the reef tank. But essentially you can wait 1, 2, 3 or even 4 months if you want to, do another ICP and then basically rinse, wash and repeat the process again. Get the calculator, put your ICP results in, see what your new correctional dosages are and what your altered daily doses are, and essentially sit back and enjoy your thriving reef. Now, hopefully that has demystified the Reef Moonshiners program a little for all of you out there. If you do have any questions whatsoever, please do feel free to put them in the comments section down below. I do personally reply to each and every comment there. However, I will state that I am not a Reef Moonshiners expert. If you are looking for the best advice on the program, I would highly recommend jumping on their Facebook group, which has users from all across the world that have been using this program for a number of months or years and really enjoying the results. Not to mention, you will also get the creator or owner, Andre, on there, who has a huge amount of time available for all of these customers out there, which I absolutely tip my cap off to him, because it's not going to be an easy process responding to that many questions that the man does get. I can say, however, that I have been on the Reef Moonshiners program pretty much the entire time the Dream Reef Tank has been running, and I've got to say that I cannot complain with the growth or color I get on this system. It has been far beyond my expectations, and I have to give a small piece of that credit to the Reef Moonshiners program. It is a simple and basic to follow process. I know it seems complicated at first, but essentially it boils down to measuring individual elements, dosing individual elements to a set target value, which does not get any more simple than that if you ask me, and the results speak for themselves. Other than that, guys, I will wrap the video up there. Just a quick one today. Like I said, if you do have any questions, do pop them in the comment section down below, and I look forward to bringing you a tank tour next week. I've got an incredible nano tank right here in Melbourne that I'm going to go and feature for all of you out there. It's going to be one to look out for, so please, I look forward to seeing you next Saturday for that video then. Other than that, guys, till next time, stay safe and keep reefing. Cheers, bye.